Hey guys, welcome to another episode. First things first, let's clear out our rifle. Clear! What I wanted to go over today was what I think that when you first get an AR-15, what are the first upgrades you should do. Now, this is, again, it's opinion based and it's also situation based, but these are my thoughts, and if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments. Alright, but to start it off, I have updated this thing a little bit. Originally, this was just a DPMS Oracle 2 that had the crappy little short plastic handguard. It had a really pencil-thin barrel, a weird front sight block, gas block type thing. It had a commercial buffer tube. Ended up switching that out to a mil spec so that way I could run a little bit cooler stocks. Ended up changing out the handle. I forget what brand this is. I think I actually got this off Wish. But I mean, shoot, I've had this thing on there for years and have fired hundreds, if not 1,000 rounds through it with it on there. And other than it being a little wobbly and cheapy like that, it's not too bad. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend getting a better one. I was really worried about it catching on my gear and pulling out. But when I'm actually having the bolt forward like this, I don't have any issues with that. When it is locked to the rear, it's like this, I have noticed that it will release by itself. Well, that's not an issue because I'm not running around with my bolt locked to the rear. So to get this out of the way, we're going to make a couple assumptions. When I bought mine, obviously it didn't have like an M-lock handrail, anything like that. So we're just going to make some assumptions that when you buy your AR-15 that it's already going to have a couple of these features on here. One of them being you're either going to have M-lock or key mod, and you guys can debate about which is better. I would say that M-lock is better, but the physics of it and about how key mod, if you bump it backwards, smash it on the door, it does have a potential to unlock itself. M-lock seemed to have won that war, so I went with M-lock. The other assumption that we're going to do is that bolt carrier groups are not all made equal. They're a lot better now than they were originally. But we're also going to assume that you have a decent bolt carrier group, right? One with some nitrate on it. It's got the state gas keys in there. It's got an MPI marking for magnetically partically inspected, or magnetic particle inspection, whichever way. But we're going to assume that M-lock, decent bolt carrier. Because if you don't have a decent bolt carrier group and stuff like that, and you're worried about it breaking apart, and you're worried about those gas keys and everything coming out, you shouldn't buy it in the first place. Number one thing, when you first get your AR-15 that I think you should upgrade is some sort of sights. A lot of rifles nowadays don't come with iron sights, and a lot of iron sights nowadays that you can buy that go on top of Picatinny rails or M-lock, you know, the 45, they're just about as expensive as like a cheaper or an okay, decent red dot. This is a Vortex Strikefire 2. When choosing an optic, you want to base it off of what you see it being used for. If you're going to be hunting coyotes around the farm or anything, you're going to want some sort of variable power optic or a magnifier with a dot. And then if you are going to use a magnifier with a dot, I recommend not just having a dot, but getting some sort of reticle that's got a BDC on it. When you start shooting with a dot out further, it takes a little bit of training and practice to actually know where your hold is because there's not a really like a reference point. So there's a lot of training and practice that has to go into that. Very next thing I would recommend is getting some sort of light. This is just a cheap Amazon light. Again, broke bitch gonna broke bitch. All right, I spent I think it was like 45, somewhere between 30 and $45 on this light. And I've shot with it many times. I've shot while using it, and I haven't had any issues with it. But I don't recommend getting something cheaper. Try to spend the money. But I got lucky with this one. It seems it's really working, and it comes with a neat little pressure pad that just goes right on there, and I really enjoy it. I've got a momentary, and then I have an always on. So I really enjoy it. I hope it lasts, but it could possibly break on me. We'll see how it goes. And then can't forget the little bit of tape to cover that up so you don't have some reflection. I should really get one of those, you know, concept caps on there, but it's just something I'm just lacking behind. I haven't really bought. Next thing I would say, once you have an optic of some sort and you have a light, very next thing I would recommend is a decent sling. And then you're gonna have to figure out if you like the single point. That's like more high-speed guys getting in and out of vehicles. But if you're gonna be like patrolling, or you see yourself walking a long distance, patrolling your property, walking around holding this thing, you're gonna want a 2-point. I really don't recommend a 3-point because with a 3-point, you'll have this guy here, but you'll also have a second strap or a third strap, whatever. But you'll have another strap that comes down here, and when you're conducting your reloads and stuff in the Marines, that's what I had at the very beginning before we transitioned to the Vickers sling, is that it would get in the way of your bolt release, and that just causes kind of issues. So I would try to stay away from 3-point. In my opinion, 2-point is king. It just allows me to have the comfortability and then the room of like a single point, but not to the extent of a single point. But it also allows me to be comfortable. I can tighten this back up and walk around, and I'm not having it just drag on my neck the whole time. you do some research online. This is what I've kind of enjoyed. I like having it closer to here, closer to the actual receivers instead of all the way out here. Again, it's just more rope, more rope. It's just more sling that gets in the way of when I'm trying to do stuff. But when it's right here, my hand is never usually right in this area. My hands are usually more out here or down here. So it just kind of keeps it out of the way, and I think that's best. The other thing is I keep it on the opposite side, so my shoulder will sit right here, and I don't have the sling getting in the way. So that way I can have it here. And you can do all kinds of little tricks with like 550 cord and stuff, and get this a little bit away from you so that way you don't have so much bulk right here. But for me right now, this is kind of working. I don't really enjoy the swivels that swivel all around. Apparently you can get some that only swivel a little bit, but again, it's just a little oversight. Maybe I should pay more attention and get something like that. Next thing that I would recommend is these. This is kind of like a 2-for-1. Is especially if you're anywhere where you're gonna be wearing gloves because it gets cold half the year. Right here, this will allow you to wear gloves and manipulate your trigger a little bit easier. And again, this guy is I just got him off Wish. It's not that important of a thing that has to be like a $60 piece. Other thing I got is this grip here. It just changes the grip angle. The A2 and A1 is just such a steep angle that over time, shooting a lot, it hurt your wrists. So I ended up getting one that's just a little bit more straight up and down. I enjoy it quite a bit. You can see kind of how more straight up and down that is. An A2 is kind of out here. But this is just a Magpul MOE2, I believe. No, MOEK2. My mistake. So, and that just allows a little bit more comfortability, which will allow you to, train for longer without without hurting your stuff. And you may think like, oh, well, this grip angle is not really that important. Fuck you. I think it's important, especially someone who is holding this all the time and shooting with it. I think it's quite important. The next thing I would recommend is some sort of foregrip of some sort. I like to more like C-clamp it, and I like this as like a hand stop. So a foregrip or hand stop. I did used to run like the little stubby hand grips, but I didn't really like those because when you're working around barricades or trying to shoot on stuff, it's just always kind of in the way. It's just an extra little extension. And so when you're trying to get as low as possible, it just kind of gets in the way and bangs on things. So I like this little stubby here. That way my hand just kind of sits there and I can really pull and drive it into my shoulder if need be. And then anytime I need to use it for anything, I have that little extra stop there. After that, I would say is the stock. The only exception I would get a stock before any of the other components is that if you know, the TPMS Oracle 2 came with this stupid curved, and it was just, I get the idea is that it's supposed to curve and fit into your shoulder, but it's just a terrible design. I really don't like it. So that's why I ended up switching out to this guy. I don't really like the wide ones. It's just too much bulky. I like to try to keep it slim and sleek as possible. So that's why I ended up going with this. What is this? Oh, CTR. Really enjoy this stock. I like it. I like that it locks. The next thing, and this one's only further down on the list just because it is getting a little bit more complicated now, and a lot of AR-15s will come with decent barrels. And so what I ended up opting out to was a 223 Wild barrel, which allows me to have a chamber that can handle the pressures of 5.56 and 223. For you that don't know, 223 is kind of a little bit lower pressure than 5.56, so you should never run 5.56 in a 223 weapon. You will get away with it for a while, but one day, it's kind of like speeding. You get away with it a lot, but one day, you're going to catch that ticket, and I don't want to catch that ticket to the face. This had a pencil-thin barrel on it, so I ended up getting a little bit thicker. It's a little bit fluted for that heat dissipation, and 223 Wild barrels are typically known as a little bit more like precision. So the accuracy is definitely going to be a lot in the barrel and how much you can free float it with your handguard. This is not like a 1 MOA rifle. This is definitely more, probably closer to like the 3, maybe 2 if I'm really pushing it with some better ammo. But for what I'm doing, more than enough. Definitely takes down a deer. So the next thing I would change out is the charging handle, and that's just if you're trying to be high speed and have fun. It's just way better if you've ever tried to manipulate the stock charging handles. They just kind of suck. So this just makes things a little bit easier. It's a little bit more user friendly. And then the very last thing that I would do, and without getting into lasers and all the other kinds of attachments and stuff you can put on, if you have money for a laser, then like good on you, that's awesome. I don't have that kind of money, so I'm not even going to go into that. The very last thing I would change is the trigger, and I have just a mil-spec trigger in here. It's tried, it's true, it's reliable. I really do like the Geissele's, but honestly most people can't operate or manipulate a trigger fast enough, and a mil-spec trigger is totally fine. More precise shots, you can get a 2-stage, single-stage trigger for faster work, flat triggers, all those kinds of things. But more than likely, I would wait till the last thing to change out the trigger, just because it's more than enough. You don't have to deal with that. I think having a light on here, so that way when you see a target, a flashlight allows you to make a more accurate decision on a possible threat or engagement, and see what's going on around you. So I definitely think the flashlight's towards the top. But alright guys, that's my list of kind of updates and upgrades that I think that someone should make when they first buy their AR-15. If you have any disagreements, again, let me know in the comments. I'd be willing and open to other things. And like I said, I would probably be willing to move some of those things around, but I definitely think number one is an optic of some sort, and number two is a flashlight, so you get that good PID in. Alright guys, that'll do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate you. See you on the next one.